I'd ask this morning that you pray for me as we try to bring the message. We've got an extra reading this morning that we normally don't have. We got a lengthy reading lesson this morning, and I think it's important that we start where we're starting at and we end where we're ending at to get the point across that God has placed upon our heart. And we're going to take a reading lesson out of Numbers chapter 13, and we're going to start in the 16th verse. We're going to finish that chapter and go on into the 14th chapter. But we read here, this is where the children of Israel are getting to the promised land, and this is probably going to be very familiar to everyone, but I want to bring it back to our minds and heart as we've got a thought of our heart that I think it's very important today that we stop and just take a moment to listen to what the Lord has to say. But the children of Israel are getting to the promised land, and they're not sure what's coming next. They're not sure what's going to happen next. So Moses sends 12 spies into the land. Now it starts to sound familiar to everybody, doesn't it? Numbers chapter 13 might not sound that familiar, but when I start talking about the 12 spies, everybody said, oh yeah, now that sounds familiar. And I want us to think about these 12 spies as they go into the land to spy it out, and the ones that stay behind, and think about what they're going through, and think about what they're seeing, and remember this. God has promised them a land that flows with milk and honey. First of all, let's go back to Exodus chapter 3. Let's read the promise that God told Moses here. He said in Exodus chapter 3, verse 7, And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people, which are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmaster, for I know their sorrow. And I have come down to deliver them out of the hands of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of the land unto a good land, and a large, unto the land flowing with milk and honey, and unto the place of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. So God has said, I've heard their cry out of Egypt. They're in bondage. I know what's going on. And I'm sending you, Moses, to deliver them out. But I'm going to take them to a land that flows with milk and honey. I'm going to take them to a land that, yes, other people are inhabiting now, but I'm going to give it to them. It's going to be their land. They're going to take this land. It's going to be theirs. God has promised them a beautiful land that flows with milk and honey. And so they get to the edge or the borders of the land of Canaan, as we often hear it referred to. They get to the borders there, and all of a sudden now they're putting on the brakes. God's promised them this. And they're putting on the brakes. Let's send 12 spies in. So we get into the 16th verse of the 13th chapter of Numbers. It says, these are the names of the men which Moses sent out to spy into the land. And Moses called Ashiah, the son of Nun, Joshua. And Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan, and said unto them, Get ye up this way, southward, and go up into the mountain, and see the land which it is, and the people that dwell therein, whether they be strong or weak, few or many, and what the land is that they dwell in, whether it be good or whether it be bad. And the cities they that dwell in, whether in tents or in strongholds. And what the land is, whether it be fat or lean, whether there be wood therein or not. And be of good courage, and bring of the fruit of the land. Now the time was at the time of the first dry grapes. So then went up and searched the land from the wilderness of Zin unto Rehob, as men come to Hamath. Now listen, Moses telling him to go check this out. Go see. In other words, he's questioning God. That's what's happening here. When they're sending the 12 spies and they're questioning God, God had already promised Moses back in the book of Exodus in the 3rd chapter, I'm giving you this land. And this land, yes, there might be many people in it, but I'm giving it to you, and it's a place that flows with milk and honey. And Moses here is almost questioning God, saying, Go into the land. Tell me if there's big cities or if they dwell in tents. Tell me if there's strongholds. Tell me what the ground lay is. If there's wood in the land or if there's these precious things in the land that we can use. God already promised. So he sends the 12 in. It says, as they ascended by the south and came to Hebron, and where Amahai and Shinar and Tamali, the children of Anak, were. Now Hebron was built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. And they came to the brook of Eshcol, and cut down there from a great one cluster of of grapes, and they bare between two upon a staff. And they brought of the pomegranates and the figs. Now think about that. They cut down one bunch of grapes. You know, you go to the store, you pull out a bunch of grapes in a bag. They're in a little Ziploc baggie almost. But these men took one bunch of grapes, and it took two men, and they had to tie it to a staff in order to carry it back to the land, to where the children of Israel were, that they could see the things of Egypt, not the things of Egypt, but the things that God had promised them. Two men on a staff. This is a place that God had promised them, a place that flowed with milk and honey, where they won't have to worry about these things. The place was called the brook of Eshcol because of the cluster of grapes which the children of Israel cut down from them. And they returned from searching of the land after 40 days. And they went and came to Moses and Aaron and all the congregation of the children of Israel unto the wilderness of Paran and Kadesh. And they brought back word unto them and unto all the congregation, and showed them the fruit of the land. And they told them, we came unto the land whither thou sent us, and surely it floweth with milk and honey, and this is the fruit thereof. In other words, they confirmed the promise that God made. They are telling them right here, and they should have stopped right there and never went on any further. But they said right here, it is the place that God promised. Here are the results of the fruit of the land. This is what is growing there. This is what we would harvest. This is what we can live off of. And it flows with milk and honey. In other words, it's perfect. It's exactly what God had said. And he said, nevertheless, the people will be strong that dwell in the land, and the cities are walled and are very great. And moreover, we saw the children of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south, and the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites dwell in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and by the coast of Jordan. Exactly what God had already told Moses. So why they had to send the spies, I have no idea. They just confirmed everything that God had told them. That these people were going to be in the land, that there's going to be a land that flows with milk and honey, that you would have plenty of fertile ground to grow your crops in, you'd have plenty of places for your animals to graze, that you'd have meat and be able to make sacrifice and all this. Everything would be there. And he even told them that the Canaanites and the Amalekites and the Hittites and all these would be there. And these people said, we can't do it. It said the people are strong in the land. They're giants. There's a son of Anak there. We can't take them. And Caleb, in the 30th verse, and Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it. But the men that went up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. And they brought up evil report of the land which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, the land through which we have gone to search it is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof. And all the people that we saw in it are the men of great stature. And there we saw the giants, the son of Anak, which come from the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. All the congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and the people wept that night. And the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron, and the whole congregation said unto them, would God that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would God we had died in the wilderness? And wherefore hath the Lord brought us out of the land to fall by the sword, that our wives and children should be prey? Were it not better for us to return to Egypt? And they said one to another, let us make up the captain and let's return to Egypt. We're going to stop reading right there. I know it's lengthy reading, but I want us to understand. These people just confirmed exactly what God had promised Moses back in the 3rd chapter of Exodus, that they had this land of milk and honey, but yet they got scared because they're going to have to fight for it. I want us to, the thought or title that I have on my heart today is the promised land is in sight. In other words, we can see the things that God has promised us, just as the children of Israel could see the things that God had promised them. Let us remember what they had already seen of God. They had seen the 10 plagues of Egypt. They had seen the Red Sea parted. They had seen water from a rock. They had seen manna rain down from heaven. They had seen quails came in, and they had meat to eat. They had seen great battles that they were in, that God had brought them through. But yet they get to this land of Canaan, and they're scared and trembling because they don't think that they can do it. But the promised land is just in sight. God promised to take them out of this Egypt and can they get to what God had promised them? So we can't go. We can't do it. We can see it. It's beautiful over there. It's a land that flows with milk and honey. It's got all these big grapes, and it took 2 of us to carry it back to you. But we can't have it. God would rather us go over there and die. Why didn't He just leave us in Egypt before we could die? But no, He wants us to go over there and die. God never once said, I want you to go over there and die. But He said, I give you this land. I will give it to you. And if God says He's going to give it to us, and He promised it, He will come through. And we will not lose. We read there towards the end of the reading that they said, and wherefore hath the Lord brought us unto this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should be prey? Listen to me. Who entered into the land of Canaan? Who crossed over the Jordan with Joshua? All those that were 20 years and younger, or 20 years and older, died in the wilderness. And that 40 years that they traveled around in the wilderness, and I don't know how many times they came back by the land of promise and could not go in. But all of them that they said were going to be the prey entered into the land of Canaan. All their kids that they thought would be prey, they took the land of Canaan. They went in, they took the walls of Jericho down. They went in, they took what God had promised them. Today I want us to stop and think. We might live among the giants. We might have the walled cities all around us. But I want us to stop and think about it. Promises of God are right there in front of us, and they're right there in sight. If we just don't cringe down and get scared when we go in and we fight. You know, it's easier not to fight for the Lord than it is to fight for the Lord. It's easier to do as the children of Israel did here and cringe under the pressure, but it's more blessed to fight for the Lord. You see, if they would have just went on over into Jordan, or went across the Jordan on into the promised land there, they would have had the land that flowed with milk and honey. They would have had these things almost handed to them. You want to talk about handed it to them? Yes, they had to go into Jericho, but God handed it to them when He took the walls down. He handed them the city. You see, God has promised these things. And I believe God has promised us, if He says go, that He will go with us, no matter where it might be. And the promised land is right there in sight. God has promised us a land that flows with milk and honey, but it's not going to be easy to get to. It's not going to be easy to grab. I believe God has promised us of this work here to grow, but it's not going to be easy to do it. It's going to take labor. Jesus said the fields were white, ready to harvest. In other words, they're there, but we need laborers to go in and work in the fields. Children of Israel had the promised land right at their fingertips. Only thing they had to do was walk in and go and fight for the Lord, and God would have fought with them and took care of them. But they didn't. They got wore out. They're tired. They didn't want to fight anymore. They were done with it. Do you ever get to that point in your life where you say, well, I'm done with it. I'm tired of fighting. It's not worth it. I'm not getting anywhere. That's about where they were at. They murmured against God. They murmured against Moses and Aaron and said, let's just go back to Egypt. Have you ever thought it'd be easier just to go back the way you were than it is to go forward in the hands of God? Sure it is. Sure we think that from time to time. But I want us to remember the promises of God are right in our sight. They're right in our grasp if we just go forward. If we don't look back and just continue to move forward. God said go forward, not go back. He said come with me and I will make you fishers of men. Go forward in all this. Do not give up. Do not turn back. Do not pass go. Do not go directly to jail. Whatever you might want to call it. But go forward. It doesn't always look easy. I'm sure Goliath didn't look easy today either. But yet he stood before the children of Israel, the army of Israel there, and said, who is this uncircumcised Philistine that defies the army of God? I'm sure that task didn't look easy before him, that he moved forward with God, and God took the stone, and he pierced the skull of the giant there, and he fell. God did, not David. Let's get priorities straight. David slung the stone, but God guided the stone, and God put the stone right between the eyes of the giant fell. God handed David the giant. Why? Because he went with the promises of God. He went with what he told Saul there was proven to him. The promises of God have been proven to us throughout the years. And we need to stick with them. Jeremiah says, stand ye in the old ways, or in the old paths, and you will find rest for your soul. Rest is not out in this world. Trouble, confusion, and chaos is out in this world. Rest is in the hands of God today. And we can find that rest as His children. In the hands of God, He says, in the 46th chapter of Psalms, there He said, God is a refuge and a strength and a help in trouble. And oftentimes we think of trouble as in health issues or somebody having financial problems or family issues. But do you know what? I live in a land of trouble. I live in a land of chaos. I live in a land of sin. And I need to find that refuge. And that refuge is God. If I want to move forward, if you want to move forward, if we want to get to the promised land that God has promised us, we need to find refuge in the Lord. That's the only way we can do it. See, children of Israel didn't have one thing right here. They could not do it on their own. They had that part right. Yes, we cannot go in and battle these walled cities or these giants and the son of Anak. We can't do it. Yes, we are as grasshoppers in their sight. And according to the religious world today, we are grasshoppers in their sight. You look around and you think about these organizations that call themselves churches. We are just little in their sight. We are just grasshoppers at their sight. But listen to me, young grasshopper. We can make it. We can. Young grasshopper must learn. That's the only way we can learn is to learn from God. And to dwell with God. And to work with God. And to labor with God. And this grasshopper can grow. And this grasshopper can be big. And this grasshopper can take the giants. If we just learn from God. Walk with God. When God says go, we go. We walk, we march, we sing, we praise, we give Him honor and glory, and God takes care of the rest. You see, the children of Israel, the children did learn one thing. Now, they learned if they go with God, that God would help them, because when they walked around the walls of Jericho, people thought they were crazy. The only thing they were doing was marching. You know what? People might think we're crazy for coming to this little warehouse week to week. People might think we're crazy for trying to worship God from week to week. People might think we've lost our mind from week to week. But when it comes time for the trumpet to sound and for the walls to come down, we will prevail. Might not be tomorrow. Might not be a week from now. I don't know how long it's going to take. But if we just continue to move forward on the promises of God and realize they're right in sight, we do not lose sight of them. The Bible says, look unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. If we don't lose sight of the goal, we'll make it to the end. Fields are white, ready for harvest. We just got to work and labor. It's not going to be easy. The book of Job, 14th chapter, said, the man that is born of woman is a few days. In other words, life goes by so quick. Within a few days, we're full of trouble, he says. Full of trouble. Struggles. If we suffer for the world, we're suffering for the wrong reason. If we suffer for Christ, He will be with us. And we'll be blessed. We will be blessed. We are one. You know, it sounds funny. I see another cartoon that the boys watch from time to time. These little space men, they've got this orb that comes around. When the orb lines up, their little antennas flare, and it says, we are one. We know we've got this great God that when He comes around and His children look towards Him, we are one. And if we stand united, we cannot fall. But we must stand united. Whether we be 1,000, 100, or 1. If we stand in unity, praising God and come in His name, we will prevail. This morning, I'm going to try to wrap it up. I don't know what we're afraid of in today's day and age. The promises are right there in front of us. We're just the modern day children of Israel. We walk around the land of promise all the time, but we get right there to the edge and we see the great things and we almost cringe and say we can't do it. But let us not forget what Paul said in Romans. If God be for us, who can be against us? We're not going to go through and try to quote every bit of it, but I want us to think of that part right there. If God be for us, there's no doubt in my mind that if we go with God, God will go with us and He'll be for us. If God be for us, who then can be against us? There's none that can stand up against us if we go with God. And the children of Israel should have known this by all the miracles they've already seen. The Egyptians were hot on their tail and their Red Sea in front of them. They had nowhere to go, but God parted the Red Sea. They walked across some dry ground. They should have known that if they just go over there and fight, that God would give It's going to take a fight. I'll be honest with you, it's not going to be easy. It's going to take a fight. And when it takes a fight, that means we got to dig in our heels, and we got to get dirty, we got to get in the trenches, or we might have some ammunition go across our head. We might even get shot from time to time by the wiles of the devil, but we must not give up. We must continue forward. There are children, there are grandchildren, there are great-grandchildren, that their souls are in the balance. There's ones that I wish were here today that are concerned about their soul that aren't here today. Their soul is still in the balance. I haven't given up. And we need not to give up, because we need to stand on the promises of God and realize that the promised land is right there in sight. And I'm not talking about heaven. Yes, heaven's there. But God has promised us a land that flows with milk and honey here, but we're going to fight for it and not give up. In this fight, let's turn to Ephesians chapter 6, and I will close with this. Paul writing here in the 6th chapter and 10th verse, says, "Finally, my brother, be strong in the Lord and in the power of His might." We've got a God that's got power beyond power. And we've got access to that power. We've got access. You know, the President of the United States got access to a red button that can start a nuclear war. But we've got a God that's got more power than a nuclear bomb. He's got that power. And we've seen pictures of the mushroom crowds and the effects that can have. My God's got more power than that. And we've got access to His power. He said, "Finally, my brother, be strong in the Lord and in the power of His might." Or in other words, you can tap into this power. Just tap into it. He said, "Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand against all the wiles of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Wherefore take unto you the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all to stand," having to do all that you can. You feel like you have nothing else you can do. You are powerless. You're weak. You're about ready to fall. You see the giants in the land. You know you're going to have to cross over the river. You know you're going to have to do this. You're going to have to fight. You're going to see the walled cities. And after you've done all that you can do on your own to stand, he goes on. He says, "Stand, therefore." In other words, don't give up. Don't back down. Don't turn around. Don't run. But stand strong. He said, "Having your loins girded about with the truth, having the breastplate of righteousness, and your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Above all, taking the shield of faith, wherein ye shall be able to quench the fiery darts of the wicked, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God." He didn't leave it there, though. He said, "Praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, and watching there with all perseverance and supplication for all the saints." How do we put on the armor of God? It starts with prayer. What should our day start with? Prayer. What should our day end with? Prayer. And I think if we start the day off with prayer and end it with prayer, the middle will fall right into place. Because we're entering the day with God and we're exiting the day with God. If we keep God in our mind and heart, we can do this. You notice in this reading, and we'll try to hush right here, but you notice in the reading there about the armor of God, it doesn't say anything about the back. It doesn't have any armor on the back. And you see, God does not want us to turn and run. He wants to go forward. And if we continue going forward, we have the Spirit of the sword and the shield, and we have the breastplate to protect us. But if we turn around and run, there's nothing to protect our back. So He wants us to continue going forward. Forward. Promised land's right there. Everything that God has promised us is right there. But it's going to take work. It's going to take labor. It's going to take wars. It's going to take battles. It's going to take this and that. But victory is ours. The Bible says, "Who is he that overcometh me? He that has a victory in the Lord." We have victory. We are more than conquerors in this world. We are the children, the mighty army of God. And we need not to look back, but we need to go forward and remember that God's promised land is right there. And though we might see the giants, though we might see the walled cities, though we might think it's going to be hard, remember, it's a land that God has promised. And God's promises will take you to the end. I guarantee you that He will not back down on His promises. So let us not forget. that though it might seem impossible to us, with God, all things are possible. God bless you is my prayer.